What's up, Inspired Vision students, plus anybody I might be catching on YouTube? We are now on day 18 of 19 of our Accelerated Algebra I course. This is exciting because we're almost ready for our STAAR test. We're covering questions 29 through 41 on the 2015 STAAR Algebra I EOC. So there is 54 questions on this test. They're scattered through 5 domains. That's the whole reason why we spent days 1 through 15 covering the concepts that will be on the STAAR test. And we're spending the last few days covering the 2015 STAAR test. So I'll be referring back to these days. So if you're having issues with any of the concepts, refer back to these videos. And I have different STAAR release questions on those days. So those are great review sources as well. So if you haven't already, Google 2015 STAAR Algebra I release test or click the link that I will also provide in the YouTube video. Alright, let's get going. We're on question 29. On question 29, they're talking about boxes of candy. So if you don't want to hear any hints, make sure you hit pause because you can do this question on your own. There is no math in this question at all. But if you would like a hint, we're talking about translating these questions like we did on day 6. So the most important part of this question comes from the second sentence where they have 4 candy bars in a small box. So 4 and small need to go together, just like 24 and large need to go together. So they're going to try to trick you in where to put large boxes and where to put small boxes. Okay, so that's it. That's your hint. Here comes your answer. Make sure you pause if you're not ready. So A is the answer that they're going to try to trick you with because we're used to seeing your first part of your equation as our x. But the x-axis is actually the second part of our equation with large boxes. So large boxes should have 24. So A is not right because they switched up the numbers on you. B is our answer. All right, number 30. Number 30 has a relationship, and we have to predict when y is 30 feet long. So pause the video if you don't want to hear any hints. And this concept comes from day 15. The reason why it comes from day 15 is because t squared is the same thing as x squared, which means it's a quadratic relationship. So since it's a quadratic relationship and our L is the same thing as y here in this case, we can put this into our y equals key. Now they want the number where it is 30 feet long. Length is the L in this equation, which is the same thing as y. So we would look on the table when y is 30. That should be plenty of hints for this question. Now the tricky thing about this one is we won't see an exact answer. I can show you how they get an exact answer in the next screen, but you should be able to find the answer without seeing an exact answer. Okay, here we go. So if you put this into your y equals key, you have 0.8 x squared. Then you look at the table, and you're looking when y is 30, but you never see 30 for y. We see 28.8, which is the closest number to 30. So we picked the closest answer to 6, which is 6.1. Now, if you're not happy with that answer, then we can do an exact answer by doing this. If you put 30 for y and you have 0.8 x squared as our equation, and you're trying to solve for x, then you would divide both sides by 0.8, which would be 37.5. But it's still equal to x squared, so we would take the square root of that to get 6.12. Okay, that's our answer for 30. Here comes 31. 31 requires no math at all, very little. All we have to do is translate this word problem into an equation that makes sense. Okay, so pause if you don't want to hear any hints. These concepts come from day 10, where we're translating a little bit more inequalities. Okay, so first hint. The first sentence says the airline passengers have to pay $439 no matter what. So that means we have to add that cost to our equation. Well, all of them have 439, so that doesn't help very much. The next sentence says the customers may check 2 pieces of luggage. That means 2 pieces are free. Other than that, they have to have a fee of $25. So 25 is going to be our slope, which means that gets multiplied by our x, or our p in this case. But you have to account for p having to be greater than 2 because they got those 2 pieces free. Okay, that's our hint for this question. Here comes the answer. Now, A would be our equation if we didn't have to worry about those 2 pieces of luggage. Since we have to worry about those 2 pieces of luggage, so that would be $25, which is your fee, times your base rate, or plus your base rate. But since we have to worry about those 2 pieces of luggage, our answer is B. Okay, here comes number 32. Number 32 also requires no math at all. Pause if you don't want to see any hints, because this one is completely doable without any hints. This comes from day 13 and 14 when we talked about quadratics. Okay, first off, that 32 founding members just means that's the y-intercept of the equation. And they give us the equation. It's y equals 3x squared plus 32. So all we need to do is use that equation that is already solved for y and make sure you know that x means months, and then we're going to check off each one of these answer choices one at a time. That's it for your hints on this question. Okay, so first off, number S says the number of members in the organization increased by 9 members each month. But if we look at our table and start with 0, because that's what the number we would have to start with, you can't have negative members, you would see that the increases by 3 initially, then 9, then 15. So F is not right because they increase by varied amounts, not 9 each month. Now G, we would have to go to 16. 16, we see 800, not 288. On H, we know that they increase by 3, then 9, then 15, so we know that H is out. And then for J, it says at 6 months there's supposed to be 140. That is true, so that is right. Okay, here comes number 33. Number 33 is talking about a scatter plot, and then we have to make a prediction. Pause if you don't want to hear any hints. We talked about scatter plots on day 7. Okay, here comes your first hint. Now, normally, we wouldn't want an equation for scatter plots, which would mean we would need to go and type at least 2, 3, 4 points into our stat key and do stat count 4. And we know it's going to be linear because it's making a straight line. Now, I said normally. That's normally because when we're asked to make a prediction, we don't know the number. We can't see the number on our graph. Like, for instance, this graph goes to 310 pitches thrown. Well, if we were asked to make a prediction for 350, which isn't on the graph, or 400, which isn't on the graph, we would definitely want an equation. But 275, that falls in between and is on the graph. So we don't really need an equation. However, if you feel comfortable with the equation, go ahead and do it. The only problem is these aren't giving us an exact numbers. But still, you'll get your answer if you get an equation. Now, what you could do, and the easiest way to do this question, is draw a line through the middle of the points the best you can, and then go to where 275 would be for pitches, and then tell me what your y is. Okay, that's it for hints. Here comes the answer. So my line's not perfect down the middle. This is normally what stresses people out, is they don't have a perfect line through the middle of scatter plots. But that's kind of how that works. Mine's not perfect, and at 275, which would be between 270 and 280, I would have an answer right about here. But the only answer that makes sense is 100, because 150 and 160 are way too high. 60 is way too low. So C is the only one that makes sense. Okay, number 34. Number 34 looks hard at first, but it's actually a very easy problem. The trickiest thing here is the word domain. Because we talked about domain on day 14, that is what we will see other questions related to domain. But this question's kind of unique because of what is involved to do this question. So first off, the first hint is it has a max cargo weight of 160,000 pounds. 160,000 pounds is your total, so that means we would have an equation equal to that number. And then next it says 2,000 pound containers. They want to know the number of containers on the ship. So 2,000 is your slope that you would have to multiply by your x. And then they want to know domain. So that means we're solving for x, because domain always means x. So if you were to write an equation, you don't even have to write an equation for this problem. But if you were to write an equation, it would look like this. It would be 160,000 equals 2,000x. Okay, that's it for my hints for this question. Hopefully you know what to do. Okay, all you have to do in this question to solve for x is know that 2,000 is your rectangle. So you would, in order to solve, you would divide both sides by 2,000. 160,000 divided by 2,000 is 80. 80 is the greatest number of containers I could have on the ship. Okay, here comes number 35. Number 35 is talking about systems. We talked about systems on day 9. Here comes your first hint. When we solve for systems, you're going to have to memorize this for STAAR, because systems is a major topic on STAAR. And our first thing we have to do is solve for y. Well, if you notice, both of these equations are not solved for y already. The first equation would need to be solved for y, and this is the whole reason I taught you the rectangle and the triangle. The number in front of the y is 2, and we still have plus 14 on the right-hand side of the problem. So we would need to move 14 next by subtracting 14 on both sides. And then very, very, very important going into your STAAR test is 3x minus 14 needs to go side by side, and that's equal to 2y. We can move the 2y over to the left-hand side because it's an equal sign. But what I need you to do for this question is finish dividing both 3x by 2 and 14 by 2. Tell me what this equation is. Then follow these steps. You would plug both equations into your y equals key. If you see both of your graphs on your graph, then you would do calc 5, enter 3 times. If you can't, then look at your table. Okay, that's it for hints. Here comes the answer. So 3x divided by 2 is 1.5x. Negative 14 divided by 2 is minus 7. Type both of those into my y equals key. Looking at the graph, I see both of them. So then I'm going to do second trace 5 enter 3 times, and I'm going to see where the intersection is. It is 3.33 and negative 2. But we only want the x value. Well, 3.33 repeating is 10 over 3, so that would mean A is my answer. All right, number 36. Pause if you don't want any hints, because there is very little math on this question. We talked about translating problems in the x-intercept, y-intercept on day 7. Okay, first hint. You actually have 2 graphs in this problem. So we have our one equation, and then we have to translate it down 10 units for the second equation. We'll talk about that in a second. So the first thing we need to do is get our first equation. We get our first equation by using our stat key. So type these points into stat. Now, if you haven't already, you might want to turn your diagnostic on because we want to verify that this equation is linear. So if you haven't, keep in mind that turning diagnostic on is one of the most important things you need to do on your STAAR test at first. So go ahead and do that. Then look at your equation. Now, I forgot to turn diagnostic on, but this equation is linear. So I would want to write it down as negative 1.25x plus 8. Here comes the second part of the problem. We want to translate it down 10 units. So if you're translating something down, you're only changing the y-intercept. The y-intercept, I need to take positive 8 and subtract 10. 8 minus 10 is negative 2. This gives me my second equation. And this is how we're going to answer the question. Because now we're going to type both of these equations into our y equals key, and then take a look at each one of these answer choices to see which one's right. Okay, that's it for my hints. Here comes the answer. So when you graph, pay attention that it says the graph of G was translated down 10 units. So the first line that comes out is line G. The second line that comes out is H. So when you read F, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. It says the graph of G is 10 units to the right. The only thing that makes F wrong is it's not 10 units to the right, it's actually 8 units to the right. So F is out. Now G and J are talking about steepness. These are both the same slope. So that means it's the same steepness. It's not greater or less. So G is out. And then H says graph G is 10 units above. This is true. So this is the reason why H is the answer. All right, number 37. Number 37 is a tricky question that we actually didn't cover yet, and 100%. But I think I can explain this well enough for you to understand it. So number 37 is a quadratic where we have to solve and get the solutions. We did talk about that. The only thing that makes this a little weird is right now it's equal to 18. So quadratic equations have to follow the format of ax squared plus bx plus c, and it has to be equal to 0. Right now it's equal to 18. So our first hint is we need to move the 18 over to the left-hand side of the equation by subtracting 18 on both sides. But pay attention that 18 is not a like term. So that's the reason why knowing that it's supposed to be in the format of ax squared plus bx plus c helps us, because we're supposed to have all of these side by side by side and then have it equal to 0. Now, once you have an equation equal to 0, then you can type it into your y equals key. So type this into y equals, and then look for when you have two of your x values equal to 0. Okay, that's it for your hints. All right, so the two answers that are equal to 0, y equals 0, is B. So just keep in mind, if you see another quadratic equation, I know this is quadratic because I have x squared in the problem, have it equal to 0 before you type it in to y equals. All right, number 38. Number 38 is called a walking diagram because there's no math at all in this problem. You just have to read what's in the problem and match it up. The closest thing we did to this is day 2, but we actually haven't done a problem like this yet. All right, so first hint, all you have to do is take your key phrases and make sure they make sense in your problem. There's only going to be one answer choice that has all the phrases. So first, it says a factory worker packed 12 boxes at a constant rate. Constant means that it has to be going up at the same time each time. So 12 boxes, they all have 12, and they all appear to be constant. So nothing there. Now next, you have to take a 30-minute break. If you notice, 30 minutes, time is on the x-axis, and they're going up by 1 whole hour each time. So 30 minutes would take it in half. So only one of these will have a 30-minute break. Actually, 2 of them have a 30-minute break. But then you have to pack at twice the rate before the break. So that means it has to go up steeper or faster than before. Then you spend an hour off. Okay, that is a lot of hints. Hopefully you have your answer. Okay, so the one that matches up is F. The one that was close is G. But the problem is both of these have a half-hour break. But after the break, G did not go up at a twice the rate as F did. So F was the one that went up as twice the rate as before the break. And then they both had an hour off after. But F is right. All right, number 39, we have to figure out the equation from the diagram. So very little math. You might be able to do this without any hints. If so, please do that. Okay, first hint. We want an equation, so we're going to use our stat key. So type these into stat. Get an equation. Helps to have diagnostic on so that you know that it's linear. And then you should know what to do from here because I'm not giving any more hints after this. Okay, so what makes this question a little tricky is we have to figure out which answer choice makes the most sense according to our equation of negative 65x plus 620. So if we look at our table and start at 0, then go down to 1, each time it goes down by 65. So that means that's our cost. So on A, it says it has the cost of 245. That's not true because it's the cost of 65. B, it says the number of 555 miles per hour. That's not true because it's the per hour. That means it's a slope. It's really 65 per hour if we're going to try to do something like that. Now C is right because it says the remaining number of miles after on a 620 mile trip. We started at 620 at 0, so that makes sense. And then you're at 65 miles per hour. That makes sense. D would be right if they had 620 here instead of 555 because they have the slope right, 65 per month. Okay, only 2 more questions and then we're done for today. So number 40, it's talking about inequality. We talked about inequalities on day 6. Now, your first hint. Y is already alone, so that means you don't have to distribute. you could type it in just like this, -6 parentheses x minus 18, close parentheses minus 2, into your y equals key, and then look when y equals 46. But if that bothers you the way that it is, you could distribute -6 times x is -6x, -6 times -18 is plus 108, then subtract 2, they're like terms, to be 106. If you were to type this into your y equals key, you would have the same answers as this. Now, either way, we need to look for when y equals 46. And then we need to remember that we're dealing with an inequality, and sometimes inequalities we have to flip the symbol. That is it for your hints. Okay, so if you're looking at the table when y is 46, you see that x is 10 when y is 46 because we're looking on the y side. Now, remember your two reasons why we flip the inequality. We flip when there's a negative in the rectangle, but we didn't even have a rectangle in this problem because it was already solved. We also flip with because y, we're solving for y in this case, is on the right-hand side. But y is on the left, so that is right. So we didn't need to flip this symbol at all. So all we need to do is pick the symbol without it flipped at 10, and that would be F. All right, last question for today. We're talking about a zero of a function. We talked about zeros on day 9. Your hints. First off, r of x is the same thing as y equals, and a 0 is that's when y equals 0. So all you need to do is use this equation and look when y equals 0, not when x equals 0. This is the trap that they'll try to do for you. Okay, here comes your answer. So if you type it into y equals key, look when x equals 0. See, there you go. When y equals 0, x is 6. The trap is when x is 0, but we don't want that. We want when y equals 0. That's what that word means, zeros. So we would pick the answer as C here. Because whenever they ask for zeros, it's always when y equals 0. Okay, that is it for today. Hopefully you got something out of it. We only have one more day to finish off this release test, and hopefully that'll prepare you for the STAAR test. Stay tuned.